Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ashwin and my university ID is 650651. Today, I'll be talking about Thailand's carbon emissions. So stay tuned. Now, before we get into it, I had a smart question, a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time approachable question. In what ways can an in depth evaluation of Thailand's historical carbon emissions data by sector and energy type guide the creation of a targeted carbon reduction strategy that enhances the efficiency and appeal of carbon credit mechanism for Thai companies? My personal favorite and something I like is carbon credit, and my company I wanted to do was carbon credit. So let's think about it. Now, before I started, I had to have a plan. We had to find data sources to understand Thailand's carbon emissions. It can't just be any random data. We had to understand the data, visualize it, and then create a plan. So we started. Then we had to find the data source. Thankfully, Thailand's government offers this data. The Ministry of Energy gives this data for free from 1987 till 2023. Hence, by using this data, it was reliable, free, and I was able to make informed decisions based on my company. Now, when we move on to the data processing, the files were good. However, you had to clean it a little bit. We had to first combine all the data sets into one good Excel file so we could compare a lot of it. Next was formatting all the dates to be consistent because there was a change where some of the dates were in lowercase, some were in uppercase. Hence, it could cause a lot of problems in the long run. Hence, it had to be formatted and processed. And third was checking for empty cells. And some of them was just there to make it look nicer, easier. However, in terms of creating a graph, it is very difficult. So this all had to be done before we get into the first step, which is now. When we look at total carbon emissions by energy type, this is the bar graph on the left, showing you all the carbon emissions. And you can see one dominating, the color blue. The color blue is oil. 41% of oil contributes to more than 40% of the total emissions in Thailand. That is shocking that oil is such a big emission emission carbonator that it is something that is used a lot. And when we look down, we can see both coal ignition and natural gases are something that are coming. But in 1987, it wasn't as dominant, but it has been growing. And something I thought was of the past was coal ignition. It's still used today. Next is when we look into the bar chart specifically tracking oil consumption, it looks like a mountain. And we can see the trends that why it goes down and up. You can relate it to news such as Thailand buying different types of oil, or we actually switching to natural gases and coal. This is actually seen in different graphs that when oil hits its bottom, substitutes will actually increase. Hence, this allows me to understand that when offering carbon credits, we have to understand all the industries that are connected. Next is monthly CO2 emissions in 1987 and 2023. The peak in 1987 was around 3,000. The peak in 2023 was 10,000. That's nearly 3 times as much. And when we look, oil and coal were something that was not even 500 tons, 1,000 tons. But in 2023, they've all increased to nearly 5,000, as much as oil back in 1987. This shows we have actually doubled to tripled our emissions, showing no sign of decrease. Hence, this makes me wonder, companies will be needing to look for a way to get carbon credit because carbon credit and carbon offsetting are very similar. Hence, companies should be looking for ways to actually make themselves a good guy. Hence, I feel like this is a gap in the market and something we can actually pursue. Let's continue looking at the data. Now, carbon emissions from coal and lignite. I thought coal was the past, putting these type of things into the train. I thought this is non-existent. Hence, this graph actually shows that it keeps growing upwards and it indicates that Thailand is still using it. However, it has slowed down, but that doesn't mean it's less. It's still more than 3 to 4,000. Hence, makes you wonder. And when we look at total carbon emissions by energy type, look at natural gases. We can see a steep increase from 1984, and we can see decreases in 2014, 2018. Why? Actually, there's news supporting why this happened. We can see in 1994 and 1984, inventory of greenhouse gases and the steps being taken to Thailand to address climate change. Because Thailand saw the oil increasing so much, they actually found a substitute. Next is also the LNG exports, which is natural gases, increased by 127%. The graph going down doesn't mean the consumption has decreased. It actually means Thailand found a substitute way to get this into the country. Hence, it shows carbon emissions decrease, but our consumption still stayed more and has kept increasing. Hence, this shows a problem that this is actually a loophole that you can buy the thing, of course, but the consumption stays the same. Hence, at the end of the day, you have to come back to it. And then when we look at the highest month of carbon emissions, when we average it out, we see that March is the one that has the most carbon emissions. Then is May, June. This allows us to understand that when we have to sell carbon credits to these companies, we know what we have to sell to, which months, which seasons. Now, energy consumption by sector for 1987 and 2023. Power generation, transportations were one of the biggest in 1987. Others was there, industrial was there, but in 2023, the power generation was the biggest one. Transportation was nearly as big in 1987, but it lost its market share. Losing its market share is a very bad thing. You know why? Because that means we've increased our carbon emissions. And this shows that our consumption has increased and power generation has become the largest contributor to carbon emissions. The reason why Thailand has so much PM 2.5 is because we haven't slowed down any of the energy consumption. Hence makes you wonder, what are we doing? Is there any way to decrease it? But companies need to know a better way for carbon crediting. And the data shows that over a 36-year period, the transport sector still nearly big and stays the same, where more than 34% of the carbon emissions is coming from the transport industry. Increases in industrial shows that Thailand is still reliant on this. Hence, these companies might be needing to look for a way to offset it or actually clear the consciousness, make the carbon less. And then when we look at the carbon by energy types, we can see oil was more than 1,836, but in 2023, they were able to reduce. This shows that they actually found ways to be more sustainable. However, natural gases and co-ignition is still as the same and has increased, while oil is the only one that decreased. Next, we look in the transportation sector, where 36% of the entire carbon emissions comes from transportation in the power generation. So power generation is the big idea, and transportation is one of its subsets. And when we look at all these trends of increasing and decreasing, we can actually attribute to trends within Thailand. You can see the expansion of civil aviation after 2014 shows the increase in the transportation. And we can see that as well, the natural gases risking the SE energy transition makes it less, makes it more. Hence, we can see direct correlations from the news and the data sets. Now, when we keep moving, we can see that in 1987, the biggest for transportation was just oil. In 2023, it is still just oil, which shows oil is the biggest carbon emitter for transportation. Hence, finding a better way to benefit these oil companies might be in my best interest for carbon crediting. Next, when we look at the carbon emissions from industrial, we can see increase and decrease. And I don't need to tell you by year, but I can tell you the overall long-term trend shows that it's increasing and we are not decreasing at all. Hence, when we move on, we can see the energy type of industrial is still coal and ignition, which is shocking in 2024. Today's day and age, we still use coal to power our industry. And that makes you wonder that, has there not been renewable energy or newer ways to do it? Next is when we look at the industrial energy type by 1987 and 2023. First, it was just oil, coal, and ignition. But now there's natural gases, hence showing us better future, but I don't know to what extent. Next, we look into carbon emissions from 1987 and 2022. This is a conclusion part. Now, when we see the emissions by sector, we can see power generation, transport, industry, other, dominated by oil. 2022, there's diversity, but is that good diversity? If you look at the peak in transport, it was 18 million. Now it's 90 million. That shows we've 3 to 4 times our actual emissions, showing that this is not a good trend. And can we actually hit the goals we've talked about in UN that we would be able to lower it? Hence, this made me wonder. So we went and looked, and I saw that this website shows that we are actually not on track. Hence, these companies need to know that. Hence, we can sell them better carbon credit. I introduced to you. How do we sell them the carbon credit? Because we know these insights, who is the biggest spender, who has the most emitters, we can actually sell to them and make them understand that we can help you and you can help us, and we can make the world better, but make us profitable. Hence, we look into our strategies. First is sector-specific targeting. Data reviews power generation and transportation as the leading emission sectors. EcoStart will offer carbon auditing services and focus on sectors analyzing emission patterns to identify the highest potential for carbon credit. We know transportation needs it. We know co-igniters need it. So if we find a way to benefit them, we already have the data to show that they're in need of it. A carbon trading platform. Now, I don't need to make it highly innovative. Our strategy has to be that we have to focus at these businesses. We can relate PM 2.5, we can relate carbon credit all into one thing. We would also do energy transition consulting. We're still something of the past. We use coal and ignition. So we can find better ways to actually benefit these companies, allowing us to make more money and make our services better. Next is transportation emission reduction. We want to do strategic initiatives to help the transportation sector reduce its reliance on oil. Even though we're just carbon credit, we need to understand why are they so heavily based on oil and how can we actually benefit from that? Can we partner up with another company to make our carbon credit worth more? Is there another strategy? This allows us to understand, because we have the data behind it, we can understand and create a better business strategy. We can also do incentivizing industrial efficiency. Data indicates a significant increase in industrial emissions, highlighting the need for efficiency improvements. Our EcoStart will work with industrial companies to modernize processes to reduce coal and oil usage. Because we know industrial people are using it, we know we can sell carbon credit to them to offset whatever they're producing. We know transportation is high. We know that industrials are high, but what can we do about it? They still have to produce, they still have to meet the demand. Hence, this is where we can come in and make them better. And lastly, seasonal pricing, where we know that the highest months are May, June, July. So we can lower our prices, or we can actually start consulting and heading them that, hey, you know you're about to hit your peak month, hence let us help you. This allows us to detail our strategy and have a data-driven strategy, not just any random marketing, but allows us to target it head on. Thank you for listening and watching. I'm Ashwin Chan, 6510.